The Good Guy Experience.
Welcome, guys. Good guys are back. Welcome to the Good Guy Experience, where the experience is always good, guys. I'm your host, King KJ. Everybody, the K to the A to the G, J-A-E is what they call me. And to my right, there's a lot of illustrious things in the world, but there's nothing more rare than the Pearl. My girl, Black Pearl, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey, everyone.
She's got a Love Jones for you, baby. My
What's
girl,
up?
the one and only Ash Jones, everybody.
What's up?
So you have the view, and then there's the artwork view, the one and only my man's artwork photos, everybody. And last but not least, my man's 50 grand, the Mr. Jay Weeks in the house, everybody. And we are the Good Guy Experience. How y'all feeling tonight? How is everybody feeling?
Feeling good.
That's what I'm talking about. Hey, listen, we had an extra week to get that rest, right? So, hey, we ready to get it? We ready to get into it?
Yes,
Oh, yeah, I needed it for that mental health.
All right. So what we're going to start with, guys, we're going to start with a game. We're going to call it Quick Picks. I'm going to pull up a picture, and we're going to take about a minute, and we're going to say how we feel about that picture. Are we ready for that, guys?
Sure.
All right.
Ahead,
picture number one.
Lord.
We got Saweetie, and is that Quavo? We got Quavo and Saweetie. What do we think? How are we feeling? How are we feeling about that, guys? How are we feeling?
That's a funny situation because I didn't see that one coming.
I didn't either.
Because he went so hard in February for Valentine's Day, so I was like, I thought they was in a good spot.
I'm hearing that he spent over $2 million, and she still left. What she hit him with it to the left. So
Yeah.
over $2 million being spent, and she still walked away. I mean, guys, everybody out there, that's a lesson to you. Money cannot keep you in a relationship. The way you treat a woman will keep her, not the money that you spend on her.
Facts upon facts.
All right.
I heard some of that came back. He repossessed that Bentley.
That wasn't true.
That wasn't true. They say he stopped the lease on it, so they came and got it.
TMZ.
He could have invested that money in something else. I keep going.
I mean, but
that's some expensive love.
Jay Weeks, you said that wasn't true. He didn't repo. I thought he repoed the Benzo.
No, they said that he ended the lease. So when you do that, they come in and repo it. But that's the same thing to me.
Oh yeah. Hey, look. He said, "Look, you're not gonna be riding around in this car with nobody else."
Love don't live here anymore.
Just tell you, don't buy somebody a car that's not your wife.
Or don't buy shoes for somebody. That means they'll walk out of your life.
Now I've heard that before too.
I've heard that
before.
Yep.
So picture number 2.
Ooh, not the rapist.
Deshaun Watson, the man that has been reportedly going out, and he's been to these massage parlors and things like that, and they have had different people saying different things about him. How we feel about that, guys?
Why now?
Why
now?
Exactly. Why didn't report when it happened?
Why are we waiting? Why are we waiting?
Why are we waiting until he about to?
What are y'all getting out of it?
Right. I mean, if it's that important, me personally, now look, if it's wrong, it's wrong. It should be handled. You should be held accountable for it. But when it happens, that's when you need to be, reporting it or whatever, not waiting until, I can jump on this and get a little clout myself. All right. So
that way someone else doesn't have to go through that situation. Exactly.
All right.
Not to say that if you don't report it, something's wrong with you, but that's all.
Fishy.
And picture number 3, guys. I think this is the one that everybody's gonna be like,
Oh Lord. It's a hostage situation.
Hey, look at his face. I'm Ron Burgundy. Hey, look at her face. I mean,
that was so good. Why she put that hat on? Why couldn't she come fly? I don't understand. Look at her.
I mean,
why?
Hey, look. I mean, she got the expression on her face like this.
She made a video talking about her outfit. She said that she came, ready in the army of the Lord or something
In
like
the
that.
virtual,
Is that the one where she
angel-
had the fatigues on?
Yeah.
I don't know about the army
Yeah,
of the
when she
Lord,
had
but
the
she looked like
fatigues.
she in the Black Panther army in this one with the beret on and everything. Like,
Yeah,
She looked like she didn't have time to do her hair because he want to go keep her in a hostage situation.
hey, and do we see the look at her facial expression? Like, brother, don't get too close. You already
Yeah.
look.
Like, don't act like it's all good. I'm just sitting here for the money.
Right, exactly. So look, guys, we have a great show for you. We're talking about mental health and the stigmas of mental health, guys. According to ColumbiaPsychiatry.org, in an article written by Michelle Lemp, roughly 37 million people identified themselves as Black or African American. Although we have seen successes and triumph from Black pioneers such as George Washington Carver or an Madam C.J. Walker, even entertainers such as Muhammad Ali, Michael Jordan, or LeBron James, the Black community suffers from an increased rate of mental health concerns, including anxiety and depression. According to verywellmind.com, in an article written by Amy Morin and medically reviewed by Akeem Morris, MD, we find that some communities accept the idea that mental illnesses are health problems and that require treatment. However, in other communities, there's a serious stigma that a mental health problem is a serious sign of weakness. In fact, studies have shown that 66% of Black Americans have seen mental health conditions as a sign of weakness. Ladies and gentlemen, mental health does not discriminate. According to an article written by Tanya St. John entitled 5 Factors That Affect Mental Health in African American Communities, we learned that 1 in 4 Americans will experience a behavioral health disorder in any given year, regardless of age, race, religion, or economic status. However, there are economic factors that increase the vulnerability and severity of mental health disorders in African American communities, thus decreasing their likelihood of seeking and receiving adequate treatment. Here to discuss those factors with us today is Dr. Kristen Alston.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
Hey. Would you like to introduce yourself? Tell the world about yourself.
Sure. My name is Dr. Kristen Alston. I am a clinical health psychologist. And so what I do, I look at the interplay or kind of how physical and mental health, how those things work together, right? So we know that a lot of times how we're feeling as far as our mood can affect how we're feeling physically. And we know that how we're feeling physically can affect our mood. And so I look at how those things go together. And I also treat folks with general mental health conditions. So depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, those types of things. And so I'm excited to be here with you guys today. I do have to always just let you know that any views that I express today are solely mine and are not that of my employer. And also, I'm not here to give treatment, but just here to have this great discussion with you guys and really talk about how can we work through mental health stigma. So I'm excited to be here. So let's go.
All right.
Welcome
to the Good Guy Experience. And of course, you have been seeing the comments. The comments are on fire tonight, guys. Keep them coming. Please join in with the conversation. We would love the interaction with you guys. So starting off, some things that are factors to the stigma of mental health in the Black community. One thing that stands out to me, and a lot of people have strong feelings about, is racism. Are there racist or systemic racism factors that stand out in the Black community when it comes to mental health in that aspect?
Yeah, so absolutely. I think when we think about racism and kind of the history of our people, right, the history of Black people, a lot of that we have to look at how that intertwines with mental health. And so one way is when we talk about just mental health and when we look at rates of depression, anxiety, and those types of things. So we know that the adversity that Black people face or any marginalized population, we know that that contributes to depression, anxiety, feeling overwhelmed, stressed. Right. And so just looking at it in that context, but also, and I imagine we'll talk about this a little bit later when we look at racism, systemic racism, biases, how that affects people's willingness to go out and say, hey, Yeah, I want to seek mental health treatment when they know what they've seen in the news. They know what they've seen in books they've read. They know what people have told them about their experiences when they've tried and how they were met with barriers in doing that because of skin color and those types of things. So I definitely think that that is something that we do have to take into consideration when we look at this topic.
Okay. Let's take it back. Let's look at one thing that comes to my mind is slavery. The way that we were treated as slaves, our mental stability and everything like that, the way that we were broken down as slaves, does that have any weight bearing on what we experience today? What we went through then, is that a contributing factor to our minds today as far as racism and mental health?
I definitely think we have to say that history and the things that we've went through does play a role. Absolutely. And someone, even mentioned before the question of, is trauma passed down, right? So the things that our ancestors went through, is that passed down? And there's been research that we know behaviorally, yes. Right. So we talk to family members about things that have happened in the past, even when it comes to like the social justice issues. Things like racial profiling, those types of things. We talk to family members about that. So if you have a family member that's able to say, hey, my experience with the police was this, and you hear that, or you're riding with them in a car and you see how they start to react when a police officer gets behind them. Yes, that's something that behaviorally, right, their offspring catches on to. But there's also been research, which is really interesting, that's showing that genetically, they're thinking that trauma is passed on, like through genetics, where it changes the DNA and passes that on generationally. So that's been really interesting as well.
So what you are saying is you can have genetic factors that can come down and can contribute to those mental health factors as well as those environmental factors.
Absolutely, especially when we look at things like depression, anxiety. We know that genetics can play a role, a family history can play a role.
Okay. Any of the panel, do you guys have any questions regarding that right now at this time? Do you guys have any questions regarding racism or economic factors or environmental factors or genetic factors for that matter?
Well, I think one of the biggest things, and maybe you've encountered this with some of the people that you've met with, is I know plenty of people who experience things like depression and trauma, and, especially from males. And just experiencing that and then being able to be vulnerable enough to open up and say, I really have this problem, versus what I see that a lot of people encounter in their day-to-day, where we're telling people to man up and you could be all right, So what would you say to someone, not just men, but that was just an example. What would you say to someone who feels like, something's just not right? Something doesn't feel right. What would you say to someone like that in order for them to, come to terms with it, where they can actually feel comfortable enough to open up?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it can be addressed from many angles. But for one, I would acknowledge that is how they feel. I would acknowledge and empathize with, hey, this is an experience that you've had where people have told you to man up or just get over it. And that's affected you being able to seek help. Right. So acknowledging that. But one of the ways that I come at it, again, as a health psychologist is, and I think this is important in overcoming the stigma, is that your health is your health. And for the longest time, we've separated physical health and mental health, where people feel perfectly okay with, oh, I'm going to go to the doctor because I have diabetes. But, oh, if it's depression, I feel like I can't go. And so one of the things that I say to people is your health is your health. We have to stop separating it out. And sometimes I'll ask, like, do you know anyone with diabetes or high blood pressure where they're having trouble getting it under control? And a lot of times the answer is, yeah, absolutely. And I say, what do you tell them to do? And they're like, I tell them they need to go to the doctor. They need to go get that figured out. And I'm like, it's the same thing for us, right? It's the same thing for you, right? Where your health is your health, and it's okay to go seek help for that. And so that's one of the ways that I come at it. And I found that folks kind of benefit from seeing it as that big picture than honing in on, oh my gosh, this is mental health, ooh, right? Versus your health is your health.
Okay. So I'm hearing that your mental health is as important as your physical health.
Absolutely.
So I do have a question. How do we know when we're having signs of depression? I know a lot of times I'm in a bad mood. My wife tells me I'm in a bad mood a lot and things like that. So how do I know what is depression versus just having a bad day versus, okay, it's a bad week versus, okay, you're really having serious signs of depression?
That's also a really good question, because it's not a one size fits all. It doesn't look the same in everybody. And I think that's where some folks get caught up, is they think, oh, it looks the same in everybody. These are the symptoms and this is what it should look like. And that's not the case. And so I always tell folks to look for patterns, right? So yeah, there's a difference between, oh, I had a bad day versus I've been in bed for 2 weeks and I can't get up and I haven't, showered and I don't eat, right? Look for patterns. Look for things that are interfering with your ability to function throughout the day, right? A lot of us, we have a bad day, but we can still do the things that we need to do, right? Versus if it's depression, you'll find like, oh man, I've been skipping out on things that are important, on my responsibilities, those types of things. And another thing, this is one thing that I do, and I've done it recently. If I know that I've had a really big stressor, I ask people who are close to me, point out when you see something's wrong. Like if you notice I'm not being as social, or I'm not leaving the house as much, or I'm just not on it, at work, point it out. Because sometimes we get so caught up in our own stuff that we're just going through the motions. And so that's another thing, having people that know you kind of point out to say, hey, I've been noticing X, Y, and Z, but really take a note of those patterns. And is it interfering with your functioning? And if so, to what degree?
Okay. And I want to give a shout out to everybody that is participating in the comments. Thank you for being so brave to share your thoughts and your emotions in the chat box. We definitely appreciate you.
Yeah.
Like I said, me, myself, I believe that sometimes I deal with depression. Sometimes a lot of times it's for issues beyond your control and things like that. Life happens. And I think what Dr. Alston is trying to say, don't be ashamed of that. You should treat this just as important as your physical health. If you have an ailment that I'm going to go to the doctor for my physical ailment, then I need to go and do the exact same thing for my mental health as well. So guys in the panel, are there any other questions? Are there any other?
Keep them coming. Keep them coming.
I have one question. I know that you said that there was a way that you could have genetic, basically it being passed down with depression or mental illness and things of that nature. How do you protect yourself when you work with a population that has a lot of mental illness, so that you're not taking those problems that they are having home with you?
Yeah, that is a very important question. And actually, within my setting, we do a lot of work around that, because it's like, with wellness and resiliency, right? When you work with those types of populations. And I think one of the main things is having a good support system. And I say that having one in the workplace, if there are people that you trust and you feel comfortable enough to do so, because there are things that come up at work where I have to call somebody. I'm like, hey, let's talk through this, right? But then also having that support system at home. And one of the things that's super important is to have your self-care routine and don't let anything interrupt that. I have struggled with that. I know people who struggle with that, where I'll have my self-care. I'm like, I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z. And then I have a rough day and I come home and I'm like, oh, I'm not gonna do any of that. It's so important to do those things for yourself, because that's what's gonna help keep that stress level down and keep you from falling into the things like depression and anxiety. And also, just one other thing, what I try to do is really separate and have boundaries. I think it's so important to have those boundaries where when I leave work, right? Work is work, home is home. And I know with the pandemic and people working virtually, that's more difficult. I tell people, where you work on your computer or whatever, don't make it the bedroom. Don't make it your place of peace. If you have to put it, in the dining area or in a home office, do that, but definitely try to put those boundaries in place. And again, that self-care piece and being consistent with self-care.
Well, I definitely think artwork. I thank you for that question.
Yeah.
Me, I have a real problem with that. I have a problem with bringing outside inside. And my dad, the one thing that he used to always say, son, don't bring your job or something else like that into your household. And I still have a problem with doing that.
Absolutely.
Even in the comments, people are saying that a good support system is very important. And I want to take the time to thank my wife, because that is an excellent support system for me. When I come in and I'm dragging, she does everything she can. Like, okay, baby, we can get through this and things like that. I want to give a shout out to my wife. A good support system can mean the world.
And can I say one more thing related to that question?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Knowing that it's okay to do what you can do. I think sometimes we put these expectations on ourselves that we have to do everything at work, and that's what causes us to bring it home, because like, oh, I didn't finish it, I got to do it. And being able to adjust those expectations, right? Being able to adjust those expectations that we have for ourselves as well. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Okay. Anybody else in the panel have a question for Dr. Alston at this time on those topics?
Questions, comments, just discussion?
Well, so we talked about depression, right? So what other mental health situations do we have in our community that go unnoticed? That may look like violence, may look like a disconnect. You know, we talk about depression, I guess, in a way that's some of the most common that we talk about, right? But what are some other mental health that we may go, oh, something's wrong with that brother. He's crazy, or he's up and down, or he's really violent. That may in turn be a mental health.
Some of the other things that we see, anxiety is a big one. We see a lot of anxiety, and sometimes people struggle with how to identify those symptoms of anxiety, because we know that anxiety can also have a very strong physical set of symptoms, right? Also, PTSD, so trauma. And what do we know about trauma and PTSD? And one of those symptoms, we see anger outbursts, right? We see those types of things, and that's one that goes unnoticed in a lot of people. And it goes back to what you guys mentioned earlier when you're talking about trauma. But a lot of people think PTSD, oh, you can only get PTSD if you've been military or something like that. That's not true. There are other ways that you can get PTSD. So a lot of times that one is missed as well. So anxiety, PTSD, we see a lot. Again, like you mentioned, we see depression. We see a lot of that. We also see something that's missed because people don't acknowledge it, and it feeds into depression, but grief, a lot of grief. So that's one as well. So there are all types of things that we see, and that's why I'm like, it just depends on the day, right? So a lot of things that we see.
I got a question. What would you say for people who have those days where they can't get out of the bed? Because I know sometimes I find myself every blue moon, you just like, I don't even want to get out of bed today. What advice would you give people who have those days often, though?
Yeah. In general, when we talk about, so one of the things that depression can do is it strips away our want to engage in activity. So it strips away that joy and those pleasant feelings and that want to go out and do things. And so one of the main ways that I tell people to push back against that is to push yourself to do something. I'm not asking you to say, oh, if you're severely depressed, to get up and go jog 5 miles, but at least get up, go sit in the chair, go take a shower, pushing yourself to take those small steps, because what happens is when we push ourselves to do something, that pushes back against the depression. Now, if you're finding yourself, I always tell people, if they're finding themselves in bed for days where they're not able to take care of themselves or do the basic things that they need for like their basic needs, and they're not eating, and they're finding that it's getting to the point where they're concerned about hurting themselves or just their ability to sustain themselves, then we need to talk to someone about, okay, what next steps do we need to take? But as far as one of the first steps, pushing yourself to do something. Activity. We underestimate how important activity is.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I want to go to a comment by Mr. Raymond Foreman. It's hard turning off work when you are home, because the same attitude and ethic you have on the job to get where you are today carries over into personal life. You can't work hard and maintain a standard at work, then come home and let all hell break loose. And Mr. Foreman,
good point.
I'm having a hard time with that as well. we put our emotions, we put so many feelings into our job. We try the best we can. I also see somebody saying they're experiencing PTSD from working at an alternative school. We put out everything into the job, and then when we have disappointing days or we have hard days, it's hard to come in and turn that off. It's very hard.
It is.
That's a good point, but what I encourage you to look at, because I can see your comment up here. Oh, it went away, but it said you have this work ethic where you're a go-getter, and it's like, okay, you're a go-getter, you have things that you need to do. That is good, but when you go home, you have to think about what do you need to do for yourself so that you can sustain that.
Yeah.
So you got to think about, okay, I got to go home and recuperate and take care of myself so that I can go back to work and have that go get it mentality and keep that same work ethic. And so that's where the difference comes in, because if you're at work running 100 miles per hour, then coming home running 100 miles per hour, eventually it's going to catch up to you and you're going to find, oh man, I'm not as productive at work as I've been being. And then we beat up on ourselves. So you got to think about what you need to do to help you sustain that.
It's also, I think someone else made a comment about that's where the boundaries come in. Something for me, I have kids. My thing is, if I feel like this coming home, I refuse to put that feeling into the atmosphere of my home. Because what's going to happen is I put in the atmosphere, now everyone else is going to be feeling like that. And I think I've made a conscious decision, like, I need to resolve how I feel inside so that the other people in the house don't feel that way. You know, is it easy? Of course not.
Right.
And I also do things that everyone can't do. Like, if anyone at work knows me, I hate working at home because in my mind, I've already told myself, I've meditated on the fact that this is my place of peace. Right. Work is not always a peaceful place. So in my head, if I'm sitting at home and I'm at work, now I am destroying my thought of this area that's supposed to be my place of peace, especially if you just get up and you kind of like sit up in the bed and you're working, you know? So I definitely make a conscious decision to try to divide the two. Otherwise, I do have those moments where I'm like, what am I doing here? Oh my gosh, there's no difference between the nonsense I go through at work and this place that's my home, where I'm paying a mortgage, I'm paying bills just to have unrest in my mind. So it's a daily, seriously, and I'm not saying mental health is just I made a decision not to have it. It just starts with that daily decision, like, no, I'm not doing it. This is right now.
And it's a struggle, right? And it's like you have to protect your peace. And what I tell people is that we've moved from, because there used to be this thing about work-life balance. We have to have this balance. What we found is that the balance doesn't exist.
No.
There's not going to be a 50-50. And so we've moved to more work-life integration. Like, how do we integrate the two? And I saw someone mention in the comments about drive and having drive at home. Absolutely. You're not saying you're going to leave work and lose your drive and just go home and, you know, but what I'm saying is you have to have that same drive for your boundaries and for your self-care that you have for your work in the workplace in order to sustain that.
Okay, well, let me ask this. I have a problem with that because I'm seeing a lot of comments, and working in mental health is so hard to separate from home. Home is your personal space. But what happens when your job requires you to take that home? When you have things that you must do in the home life, and it's not easy to say, "Hey, look, I got to put that down," because if you lose that job, you lose that home. So it's a mental struggle. Like, hey, if I don't do this, I get fired. So that's another stress on top of that is making the mental health struggle even worse. Am I making any sense right now? How
absolutely.
A lot of it.
I mean,
absolutely.
That's
absolutely.
I'm in. I would love to have my own business and things like that. And I know you're having your own business is going to come with stress. But what I am saying is that idea that looms over my head is, if I don't do this, I'll be fired. And then it draws you into a place of depression, like, oh, I got to do this again. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, dealing with that, for me, I realized, like, that's why it's important to have multiple sources of income, because it took a lot of stress off of me. Once I created a secondary income, the job, I'm not saying I go to work with an I don't care attitude. It made me realize, once I get off work, that's it. I leave that problem at work. I can't, because at the end of the day, for my job personally, I can't resolve it at home anyway. So I'm not about to bring it home. So when I walk out, when I clock out, that's it. I'll deal with it tomorrow or whenever I come back in. But I think it's just important to build most of the sources of income, because that way you're not dependent on that job, to pay your mortgage. It's a bad feeling when you have a job and you get fired and now you're like, oh shoot, what am I going to do? You got to have something else to rely on. You can't just rely on that job, because
Right.
jobs will let you go and replace you tomorrow. And
Right.
you have to.
But
That's just true.
But I also feel like if the core of all your thinking and the core of everything you do is a fear, then you're like feeding yourself this fear. Sometimes we let how we feel about something dictate everything, and we get lost in the sauce of what ifs. It could be, what if this happens? And
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I want you to finish your thought.
I just think the other thing about it too is, yes, it's mental health, but it's also like, for me in my spiritual life, I have to also understand that if I put my best foot forward and it is absolutely my best and there's nothing else I can do, that's it. What can you do more than your best? There's nothing more than your best. I mean, and I refuse to continue to feed what might be with fear, because that'll take you to a place you'll never come back from. You will never come back from that place. Yeah. It's like the never-ending story version of your mind. Like, you're just flying and you go, I could do this, and then I'm a homeless, and then I'm gonna have to be a prostitute, and then it's like, I don't have to, I can't.
But do you know what that is though? And you make such a great point, because when you talk about the what ifs and, oh my God, what about tomorrow? And what about next week? And what if this happens? Those are thought traps, which guess what? Contribute to anxiety and depression. The main things. Those are thought traps. And that's one of the main thought traps, that what if thinking, that foreshadowing about, down the road.
Yes.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because when we think about depression and anxiety, so much of it is how we think about things. And a lot of times we don't think about how we think because it sounds weird, right? But it's such a big part of it to recognize that how we think is one of the main contributing factors.
Oh, I also wanted to add, because I saw a comment earlier, it probably was about 5 minutes ago. A young lady said, we in our community, well, she didn't say it like this, but she basically said we try and pray our problems away. I forgot who it was, but I wanted to bring that up too, because I think that's a issue in our community. So I'm not saying all of us do it, but I mean, I find it a lot in my family where they feel like they can just pray problems away. Where sometimes, you can pray, but you gotta work too. And I think
faith without works,
praying and not enough work.
And that brings me. I'm so glad you said that, Ash. Didn't mean to cut you off. Continue, but that brings us into the next topic of barriers of mental health in the Black community. Religious beliefs. Some African Americans even see mental illness as a punishment from God. Up to 85% of African Americans describe themselves as fairly religious or religious, and they commonly use prayer as a way to handle stress. Now, this can be great as an emotional support, but it can also be a barrier to receiving professional or medical or therapeutic treatment. A lot of people may say, I mean, this is not to say that this is wrong, but a lot of people go, oh, God gonna handle it. God got me. God is going to take care of it, and things like that. Now, I know you're not trying to touch too much on religion, Dr. Alston, but is that a barrier within itself in religious beliefs from allowing people to go out and get the help they need? Because a lot of people, I mean, you and I, we grew up in a religious household, and a lot of times we definitely heard, God got us. God
He does, but he said you gotta do some stuff too.
and I think one of and absolutely, to answer your question, yes, we do see that, where folks are like, oh, I'm not going to go seek help, I'm going to pray about it, or God is going to handle it. Which, like you said, that's not to say that that's not the case. But what I tell people is, who says we have to choose? Who says why can't we pray and have faith and go to treatment? Right? We don't have to choose one or the other.
Exactly.
So yes, I pray. When I get stressed out, I pray, but also I use my stress management tools like my prioritizing. So I use both. And I think sometimes people think, oh, I have to choose one or the other. And we don't have to choose. We can do both of those. And I think letting people know that it's okay to do both. Just because you go to therapy and get some tools to manage that depression, it doesn't lessen, your prayer or your faith. Sometimes God brings that to us too, right?
Absolutely. And I want to say I am a believer. I'm a believer, but I think my thing that people don't realize is he gave everybody a gift. If you're a believer, he gave everybody a gift. He gave everybody a purpose. So, for example, I'm praying about it, and here I am at the Good Guy Experience, listening to this and realizing things that I could do better. So praying about it is fine, but where's the action? I mean, for those of you who are in the Bible, he parted the Red Sea, but he didn't make people's feet move. He made them walk across themselves. So I get it. I'm all about praying. I'm all about faith. But I know that it's very hard for you to live in a world where faith and fear it's together. Just you have to choose one.
Well, I tell you what I'm praying for. I tell you what I'm praying for. I'm praying that the Good Guy Experiences reaches 1 million subscribers, so I can work on this full time. Hallelujah.
Well, I'm gonna do one better for you. I'm gonna speak it into existence instead of praying about it.
Manifest.
Hey, one thing. I'm sorry. I've been quiet the whole time. I've been learning.
You have.
I've been listening. I've been learning from Dr. Alston. But one thing I do want to chime on, I think that we really didn't touch on is it's a few sayings that I hear a few black men say. One is men cry in the dark, and the other one is who do black men vent to? And I think especially like with some of my friends, like people feel like they can't talk. Like you don't have a friend you can pick up the phone and vent to because you don't want, you're always told not to share your business, not to tell too much of your business, but you're walking around bottling all that up. Because sometimes you can't because sometimes you can't always get to therapy. And it's good to have that good friend you can pick up and just, I'm a big believer in energy. Sometimes you don't want to transfer negative energy to someone else. But at the same time, you want to be able to bounce ideas off someone, or you want to be able to talk to someone and be like, man, I had a bad day today at work. Me and my old lady going through it, or my kids were disrespectful to me today. And, sometimes, men will talk to be tough. We'll talk to, get it, how you live, stand up and be strong. But when you have a vulnerable moment, sometimes you're afraid to show that because you don't want nobody to think you're weak. But at the same time, you're human, so you got those vulnerable moments. So that's something I think that should be encouraged. Like normalize checking on your friends.
Especially the strong ones.
Yep, absolutely.
Totally agree.
Absolutely.
Because I think that sometimes, like prime example, like people be like, yo, I'm not gonna call my boy today. I talked to him yesterday. Like, so what? Like it's people I call every single day and talk to him every single day for at least 2 hours. And I'm like, you can be tired of me. I'm gonna call you. We gonna talk.
That's what's up.
So go ahead, KJ. I'm sorry.
No. Hey, continue, brother. Yeah, you killing it, man. Continue, brother.
And you know what? You one of the ones. I'll be like, KJ, call me, talk to me.
Right.
I'll be like, let's talk. I'm not picking on you. I am picking on you, but I'm saying you one of the ones. I'd be like, yo, man, call me up.
Absolutely.
Shoot the shit. But I think that should be normalized.
Right.
Do you feel like it's really hard? Like, because you made a very good point. So as a woman, we could start boohooing anywhere and they're like, oh, you okay, girl? Come here. But do you feel, not to say you should start crying in the middle of Chick-fil-A, but do you feel like you have to hold that in, and because of how, I guess, unacceptable it comes across if a man is crying or down or vulnerable? Because I know the vulnerable part is like, some people are in whole relationships and they can't be vulnerable with the person that they're in a relationship with. So do you feel that is part of the issue with identifying if there's mental health issues? Is that actual place you could go to where you're comfortable to cry, to be vulnerable?
I mean, yeah, because most of the time, this is one thing I learned as I got older. You can't talk to everybody. You can't tell everybody everything.
Ooh, come on now.
You got to find the right person. Like I got my friends in categories. Some friends you can't tell them nothing.
Absolutely.
Some friends they're gonna give you terrible advice.
Yeah, if I were you advice.
Yeah, exactly. And then you got the friends that, okay, they can call you and dump their stuff on you, but when it's your turn, they ain't got time for you.
Can't find them, right?
Exactly.
I got those too. I got those too.
And then you got the friends that, you know, they're like relatives, they're like family. It's an organic feeling. I can call you and talk to you for hours, and I don't even realize that hours went by. You know,
Right.
Like, yeah, I mean, think about it. Our grandmas used to do that. I remember my grandma be on the phone with whoever her best friend was at the time and talk for hours. You know what I mean? We don't do that no more. We text everything. Technology messed us up.
Yes.
People don't even know. You know, a lot of these kids nowadays don't know how to have a full-blown, real conversation.
Absolutely.
Because of technology. And, you know,
unless they online yelling at each other.
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, speaking of online, I will say this. A lot of people have gotten on me about this because I do believe that we need a place to vent and to have an outlet. And one thing that I have a problem with is I do mine on social media. A lot of people, everybody on this panel has seen it. My family has seen it. I'll go and I'll vent on social media. Oh, the day was hell, and you know, I'm tired of this and I'm tired of that. And a lot of times I'll get that inbox of, hey brother, you need to keep that to yourself, or hey brother, you need to back up off of that. And while I don't agree that social media is the place to do that, I feel like it's therapeutic to me, but it's hindering me as well. So I wouldn't advise social media to be a place, but I do think people need to have that outlet or that friend, like Jay Week said, that friend that they could be able to talk to for hours or something like that. Because everybody ain't your friend. And what I had to realize is that while you're on social media pouring your heart out, some people just like the show. Some people got the pop.
They're laughing at you. And you know, it's crazy because since you brought it up, I really believe that when you put yourself out there to the wrong energy, you're going to absorb the wrong energy.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like me personally, I know you. So when I see you do stuff like that, I know you're venting. But then it's some people out there looking at KJ like, man, KJ needs to shut the fuck up, you know. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to curse with Dr. Alston, but
sorry.
but seriously though, like you know, when you put your business on, I ain't gonna say your business, but your feelings on social media, I feel like you're opening yourself up for the wrong energy sometimes.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you don't want everybody to know, like sometimes like your mindset, you know, especially if they're not sending you good vibes, you know. Like Charlamagne said, like social media is a highlight reel. That's how it should be, you know. You know, you just put up there what you want people to see, you know, and you know, some people look at social media and get depressed because they're like, oh man, this person vacationing, this person doing this person living the life.
Yeah.
And
it's not even real sometimes.
Exactly. It'd be old pictures from last year.
It'd be filters. Well, I want to say something to you, KJ. So I know sometimes you're just looking for somewhere to vent, but you're one of the few people who are blessed that one of their best friends is their spouse, is their partner, right? And then you have this awesome sister here. Hey, sister. That's there too, you know, and everyone does not have that. Everyone is not blessed enough that one of their best friends is their spouse or their partner. Right. So that's definitely a blessing to count on. And I definitely want to take a moment to say that I have been blessed with wisdom to start picking my circle better. And, you know, I have a few people that, I could be having the worst day in the world and I could sit down, grab a drink and just talk to them. No judgment. You know what I mean? Like I could say something like, I wonder what my foot would look like if I cut my toe off. You know, like, and they would laugh. You know, they might say, you need that communication, that real human, that person that in their heart is there for you. Whether it's one person or three people, whatever it is, it's not always your mother. It's not always your cousin. It's not always your spouse. But everybody needs that. And you're not going to find it in a text message, on a Netflix thing, on a quick hookup. You're not going to find that. And so it's good, just like we invest in our finance and our hair and our nails, to invest in finding the right people to be around you.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Ash. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I was just gonna add, like, just always try and remember what you do have. Like I know I say that to my friends all the time.
Amen.
Like, you know, we focus so much on what we don't have, that we don't focus enough on what we do have, and you got to shift your
Amen.
thoughts. And I tell my friends that all the time. I'm like, you so focused on what you don't have and all of this and what coulda, shoulda, woulda, and you ain't looking at what you do have. Like, you're blessed. And I think sometimes
Amen.
we don't take enough time to appreciate those things. And I feel like that'll help a lot of people's mental state if they, kind of shifted their energy.
Yeah. I want to piggyback off that real quick because J. Cole got a song that I love called "Love Yours." Like that song changed my life. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I mean, I ain't gonna lie. My wife did help me a lot too because mentally I was messed up a few years ago, and I learned like once I start appreciating what I had and what I can control, and start appreciating and loving what I do have. One day I just sat back and I said, "Man, I got it good. Like, I got it way better than some people. Like,
Amen.
like why am I depressed? Like, why am I not happy?" But some people takes them like more time to get to that mindset. There's materials you can read. There's there's materials out there that can help you. And I did go to therapy myself also, So it's like there's things out there that can help you get that mindset you need to be happy. Because happiness, that's like my number one saying is everybody on earth deserves to be happy.
Right.
That's my number one
Amen.
saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we're running down on time, guys. Before we get to that next topic, because I want to go into poverty and violence. But before we do that, a colleague of mine, actually a mentor of mine, I hope you don't mind me bringing you up, Mr. Tyrone Knox. When I got into education, I would call this brother every 5 minutes. Hey, man, what do you do about this? What do you do about this? And he'd be like, hey, brother. I mean, he was always there. But he made the statement. He said, they beat the emotions out of us as kids. So,
yes.
now, while, like I said, I'm no stranger to a whooping and things like that. And I'm not going to say if I'm for it or against it. But what I will ask, is there some tie into that being a part of mental health issues?
Yes.
A lot of people look at that and saying a whooping is a part of a slave mentality and things like that. Now, do I believe that? I'm not going to say. But I'm just asking, could there be some type of tie-in or connection between a slave mentality and the whoopings that most of us got as children? And that's just a random question from his comment.
And I was going to let Ashley answer that because I know you mentioned you wanted to speak on that. So I was going.
Oh yeah, no, I was gonna say I absolutely agree because at first I had that mentality where I did believe like, hey, yeah, sometimes your kids may need a whooping, like, but after I had to live in DC with my sister for a while, but I had to realize she has 3 kids and they're young, they're all under 10, and I had to realize like if you actually sit down and you talk to these kids, you don't necessarily have to beat them because I feel like after just being around my nieces and my nephew. They do stuff for a reason, and sometimes I got to the root of the problem just by talking to them. And then that made me realize I'm not. My parents did a great job raising me. I'm not saying they didn't do a great job, but I feel like they could have talked to me more. I feel like sometimes I might have did stuff, and they didn't even try to see why I did it. It was just you know better. Go get. It was just one of them situations. It's just
learn
like
behavior.
Talk to me to see what was really going on. So. I do believe, sometimes you really literally just need to talk to your kids. It don't matter if they're 3, 4, 5 years old. 3 and 4 years old, since they just did something crazy, they got enough sense to sit here and tell you what's going on with them. So
That's the passed down trauma.
To talk to your kids. Like, don't just go immediately to beating them. Just talk to them.
That's the passed down trauma right there. That's the passed down trauma.
We have to remember that as parents, our voice, that the way we talk to our kids is the voice that's in their head as they grow up when they're going through things also. So when which we talked about, bringing work home and you're like, screaming, that voice stays with them longer than whatever bike you buy them and video game, whatever, that lasts longer than those other things.
We
There's one question.
We are our kids.
All right,
there's one question that There's one question that I wanted to ask Dr. Alston before we moved on to the next topic with poverty. How would you say that a person could deal with grief when they are feeling like they have to be the strong one so everyone else can grieve?
Mm-hmm.
Good question. Good question.
And that is a great question. Again, I feel like it goes to, and I know it's not easy because we all deal with that, but we have to take that expectation off of ourselves and recognize that everybody grieves differently. None of us are going to grieve in the same way. Right? Like, I mean, people probably aware, me and my brother, we lost our dad. How I grieve is different from how my brother grieves, and that's okay. But we have to take that expectation off of ourselves to say that, okay, I have to be the one for everybody. And to be honest, when going through the loss of my dad, one of my coworkers gave me really good advice, because I was like, oh man, I gotta be strong. I gotta, be there for everybody. And they said, no, what you do is you link arm in arm. And when you get weak, your support system's gonna hold you up. And when they get weak, y'all gonna hold that person up. And that's how you're going to do it. And so I think changing that mentality around, we're in this by ourselves and one of us has to be responsible for holding everybody else up, when we're not in it by ourselves. We're in this together. You're in that with your support system. You're in that with the people that are feeling that loss like you. And that's how I envision it. We link arms. And when one of us is like, hey, I can't stand no more. Okay, the other one is like, I got you. Let me do it. And when you're feeling like you got it again and they get weak, you're like, I got you. Let me do it. And I think that's really helpful in that. So changing how we look at that.
All right, guys, moving on to poverty. The U.S. Census Bureau data shows that in 2014, the poverty rate for African Americans was 26.2%. All right, so how much of poverty and violence in our community is a part of our mental health in the Black community?
That's a big part. Because I mean, think about it. The main thing you want to do is be able to support yourself and your family. If you can't do that, that's going to have a big, hard mental drain on you, because if you're worrying about the next meal, you're worrying about how you're going to pay your bill, like your mental stress, like that's more stress on top of what you're dealing with already, so definitely poverty is huge, man. I mean, I've been poor before, I know how it feels, so definitely.
African Americans, 40% of today's homeless population. Think about that, guys.
I believe that a lot of that falls back on mental health facilities not having the capacity to treat people for an extended period of time. Unless you are under guardianship, if you're an adult, people feel like you're over 18, you're just out there on your own. So unless you actually are, the ward of a county or something like that, and you are let go from a mental facility, you have nowhere else to go. A lot of times you're on the street, you're getting into trouble, things of that nature. But I feel like mental health plays a big part in those numbers.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And the lack of provider cultural competency. A lot of times when we as Black people, when we think of psychology or psychiatrists, we picture a Caucasian man talking to us. We don't see a Black provider talking to us about Black issues. How much of that is a problem when you see in and out of the office about talking to a Black provider versus a white provider, or what we expect to see in that nature?
Yeah, I think that's a big part. So when we talk about stigma of mental health and the barriers to African Americans getting mental health treatment, you'll hear a lot of people say, hey, I don't see anybody that looks like me. Right. And so they're hesitant to go because they're like, no one's going to understand my experience or my point of view. And so a few things with that. I think so for one of the things I've seen recently is that they're trying to do more like apps and internet stuff to help people become knowledgeable about African American or minority therapists or psychologists, psychiatrists in their area, so that people can locate those individuals. But also, it's interesting because you asked kind of what I've seen. I've seen it from both sides. I have seen people who look like me say, hey, Dr. Alston, ooh, I'm glad that you're Black. And I've also seen people say, ooh, Dr. Alston, I hate it that you're Black. And so I've seen both where sometimes people prefer people who look like them and sometimes people don't. And so we do know that there is when we look at African American providers, that there's a limited amount, but really getting to the root of, for one, how can we expand that, and how can we get more people that look like us in these fields, right, doing this type of work that's on a bigger, like a larger scale. And then also for folks who are going to treatment, understanding what is it that you want, what do you want that to look like? Do you want someone that looks like you? Would you rather not? It is up to you, but understanding it's not a one size fits all. And it's okay to go in there. You might go in there and see somebody that looks like you and you're like, I'm not feeling this, right? It's okay for it not to work for you. You're not obligated to go and see someone and say, oh, I have to stick with that person. It's okay for you to find what works for you. And also understanding that because there's a lack of minority mental health providers, there are providers too who do have training in cultural competency. I'm not saying they're going to understand every aspect. That's not what I'm saying. But there are providers who do have an interest in trying to understand and have that cultural competency so that they can help people so that they can help minorities and African American people or different marginalized populations. So I think that's a big issue. And, you know, mentoring, helping people. Like, I know people that want to get in this area who are African Americans, minorities. I'm like, how can I help you? What can I do to help you? Do you need to come shadow me? Do you want to come sit with me? What do you need from me so that we can get more people in this area?
So now that we have discussed 5 problems, we've discussed racism, we've discussed religious beliefs, poverty, violence, and lack of provider cultural competency. What are some solutions to mental health in the Black community? What are some solutions that we can do in our communities?
Well, I know we're running short on time, and I want to make sure, you know, that everybody has a chance to share a few things that we can do. For one, recognizing that this is real, y'all. Mental health is real.
Absolutely.
And we have to take it seriously. Yes, there are Black people who are out there committing suicide. We've seen the rates of suicide going up in African American adolescents, right? We've seen more people attempting. We're seeing depression. We're seeing anxiety. So for one, knowing that it's real and taking it seriously, trying the best that we can. It starts with us. We have to remove some of the things, like, for example, calling people crazy. Right? We have to removing that from our vocabulary. One of the examples I give is people say, oh, people with mental health conditions are crazy. I take schizophrenia, for example. Schizophrenia, they say, is related to having too much dopamine, which is a chemical neurotransmitter. They found that other neurotransmitters are involved as well. But guess what? Parkinson's disease is when you have not enough dopamine. And I always say, do we call people with Parkinson's disease crazy? And the first thing is like, oh no, absolutely not. And I'm like, it's the same chemical, right? And so really removing these terms from our vocabulary and really being more accurate about the things that we say, and not saying, oh, that person's bipolar, they're mad one minute and happy the next. That's not bipolar disorder, right? So stop throwing those things out there and just being willing to help, being willing to listen. There's help out there. It's not always easy to find. We know that there are barriers, but being a listening ear, resources. I always tell people, if you need it, the National Suicide Crisis Hotline, 1-800-273-8255, right? NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, North Carolina has a chapter. You go to their website, they have different resources. Your primary care provider is another resource. So a lot of times they can help get you to the right place. But again, I think the first step is recognizing that this is important. This is real. We have people who are dying from mental health issues. And until we decide to, if you can see my shirt, breaking our silence, healing ourselves, overcoming mental health stigma, we got to do that. Like that's what we got to work towards. So that's what I think some of the next steps are.
So what I want to do right now is I want to thank you, Dr. Alston, for coming on and spending the time to talk about an important issue in our community. Thank you so much. We have reached that hour time. Thank you guys in the chat. Thank you guys for being a part of this. I think this is something, the start of so many conversations that we need to have within our communities and within ourselves and things like that, guys. All right. So
Sorry,
Oh,
one more thing. I'm so sorry. People in the chat who were saying hi. I'm sorry, I didn't know how to respond, but hi, and thank y'all. And if y'all want a part 2, tell the good guys that y'all want a part 2 eventually. So
yes, I definitely think that a part 2 is coming because we have questions that we did not get to and everything like that. So definitely part 2 is coming. We're an amazing show. Thanks, great discussion. It was a great discussion, guys. This is something that is definitely needed. All right. So what I want to do right now is I want to go through with final thoughts, starting with you, Black Pearl. Final thoughts.
I think this was excellent. Part 2 must come. But I just wanted to take a moment to just express an attitude of gratitude. I want to just shout out my support system and, the person that I'm able to call and be like, look, I really need to talk things out. That the people in our circle go so underappreciated. And so I just want to say thank you so much for keeping me sane, or my version of sane. So that's my final thoughts.
Ash Jones, everybody's on you.
So yeah, I just wanted to tell everybody, just be as positive as you can. Keep good energy. Wake up with a positive attitude, and just speak positivity into the atmosphere. Because I'm telling you, it's real. Once I changed my mindset, my entire life changed. I went through depression, so don't be afraid to speak up about it and just be positive. That's all I can tell people. Positive thoughts. You gotta change them thoughts. But yeah, that's all I gotta say. Oh yeah, and yeah, let's do a part 2. I think we need a part 2. Absolutely.
All right, Mr. Jay Weeks is on you, my brother. Jay Weeks is frozen. I thought he was just looking.
I thought he was posing.
I thought he was posing too. Like in thought for that deep poetic blast.
Hey, look, he fooling everybody. He done went off. I'm gonna post this picture here while I'm off again. All right, it's on you, artwork.
Well, first and foremost, I want to say thank you to Dr. Alston for coming up here this evening with us. Also, in final closing thoughts and everything, I want everyone to know that you can always reach out in your community for resources. You don't have to deal with these problems on your own. You can always reach out to some type of mobile crisis hotline. You could reach out to a suicide prevention hotline. There's always someone out there that is willing to listen. You don't have to listen to this, have these problems and feel like you are all on your own. So there's always someone out there that can help.
And before we get to the thoughts of Dr. Alston, I would just like to say thank you so much, Dr. Alston, for coming on and spending your time with the Good Guy Experience. This was information that was greatly needed. It was a conversation that needs to be had and needs to continue to be had. All right. The way I feel about it, guys, we talked on so much. Please, if you're feeling depressed, if you're feeling like you're anxious, don't hold it inside. Don't feel like you have to be this pillar or this mountain of strength. Even the strongest person gets weak, guys. Please have an outlet. People are if I'm gonna get personal right now, people are pushing me to go and have therapy, and it's okay. It's okay, guys, to go out there and go above and beyond for your mental health, for your health, guys. Please, it's serious. We discussed our suicide rates in our community. We discussed our poverty rates. We discussed our violence rates. It has to change. As Tupac says, we see the old way wasn't working, so it's on us to change to survive. All right, and Dr. Alston, your final thoughts.
I just want to thank you guys for having me, and I definitely commend you guys for what you're doing, for the community and having a forum for people to come and talk about things like this. So I commend you guys and thank you for having me. And just such a big first step you guys did here today. I always say we have to break our silence around this topic, and you guys did that today with this forum, and I appreciate that. So again, everybody, your health is so important. Your health is your health. Mental health, physical health, all of that. And so take care of yourselves. We only get one us. So take care of yourselves. And thank you guys so much.
All right. And guys, before we go next week, you want to see the good guys and you want to see our counterparts. You want to see the person you want to see the lady that said, okay, KJ, you're good enough for me. You want to see You want to see the person beside artwork photos. You want to see Mrs. Weeks. You want to see everybody. Want to see a couples episode next week. We will be having that. We will be discussing Black love.
All right.
Next week.
And I'll be hosting, guys.
You don't want to miss it. All right, guys. And we will be looking for that part 2 with Dr. Alston. Be on the lookout for it. Thanks, guys.
See you guys.
Bye. Bye.
Welcome to the Good Guy